and real life. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Coxie. I'm the deliverer of Women in DeFi, and with me is Levi. Levi is a blockchain developer and a technical writer. So, I want to introduce yourself. So, please kindly introduce yourself and let's start. Let's get
Uh,
started.
all right. Hi everyone. I'm Levi, I'm a blockchain developer and a technical writer. I love contributing to software documentation, and I'm here today to talk about open source, provide an intro to open source, tell you what open source is about, how to harness your open source contributions to grow your career, your tech career, and also why open source basically. So, especially if you're in the Web3 space, you've probably heard the term open source very often. A lot of tools, libraries, and even the blockchain itself we use are all open source. And you've probably heard that term thrown around a lot, and it's such a big deal currently in today's tech landscape. So, what does that actually mean? Like to me, open source is more than a technical term. It's it's a whole movement on its own. It's more than like just a development model and all of that. And it's has kind of reshaped the way we build, the way we share technology, the way we use technology basically. From our operating systems, our libraries we used to build, frameworks, and all of that, right? Open source is everywhere, and it's what is currently driving innovation in the tech space that we are. So, without further ado, I'll get started on what we have for today. Okay, all right. So, what is open source? Open source refers to software with source code that anyone can inspect, modify, enhance, and distribute. The key principles of open source are transparency,
Um,
collaboration, community driven development. So, key principles here refer to the foundation on which open source is built and what drives open source software. So, transparency. Open source software, like the definition implied, is software with source code that is available to the general public. Anybody can see this code, anybody can fork this code and modify it, enhance it, or use it as a foundation to build their own software. Open source allows developers around the world to collaborate and iterate on projects. It basically allows you, it basically reduces the barrier to entry into tech for anybody because for for most of the open source communities, I as a person now, I could easily for any of the projects that I'm actively contributing to, right? I could easily go there, pick up an issue, right? Get assigned to the issue, make a pull request, and just like that, right? I've made a contribution to a project that, let's say, sorry, to software that, let's say, I've been using, but so software that like I'm a user of, right? So I can just easily make my own contribution. The barrier to entry is low. I can just do that easily, and it thrives on community-driven development. What that means is, for example, now in the Web3 space, Web3 is Web3 is found on the belief that the users are like the users are basically what drives the software, right? We are supposed to be like the first class citizens in the Web3 space. So, because of that, it doesn't really make sense that a corporation or an entity or an organization should be the ones deciding how their software is going to look like, what upgrades to make, what to modify, all of that, right? Because the users are basically the ones that this software is built on. So they should have a say and they should able to, modify and enhance the software that they are using. So open source promotes that, right? Open source allows the users to be able to define. what these softwares should look like, the features it should have, and all of that by basically making contributions and helping to improve the software whenever they can. So some examples of open source software are Linux. Linux is a popular operating system for most of us that are running on Windows. At some point, you've probably had to install WSL. So I feel Linux is a popular operating system that like we're all familiar with. There's Mozilla, there's WordPress, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and like a host of other blockchains and tools that we use in our everyday work. Okay, so why why open source? There's this common misconception that because a software code base is available to the general public, like is it really safe? Is it supposed to be like that? Especially for us, most of us now in Nigeria, right? Most of the softwares we are used to, right? You can't find their code base are not accessible to the general public. You can't find. I don't even think like you can get access to any of them, right? So that like begs the question: the softwares that decide to make their code base open source, right? Why do they do that? What do they benefit from that, right? So, like I mentioned at the beginning, right, one of the most important uh, cornerstones of open source is this community driven development. So when as a community now, when a software now has like a strong community, strong and diverse community from around the world backing it, first of all, this community now can collaborate and iterate on projects quickly. These collective efforts now from like each member of the community now leads to faster innovation, because if someone has an idea or has like a contribution to make, the idea can be easily tested, improved, deployed at a pace that's kind of difficult to match if this software was closed source, and if okay the only people working on it were the people employed by the corporation. This this collaboration now allows anybody to be able to help out or make contributions to this software, and it increases the pace of development of the software. So fostering collaboration and knowledge exchange. Open source projects bring together developers, designers, researchers, writers from around the world. Everybody coming from their different backgrounds, right, has knowledge to exchange, and best practices and tips and all of that to exchange with people that they are working with. By making this source code for the software available, open source projects can encourage learning and skill development. Like developers around the world can study, modify, build upon like the already existing code, and um this process now promotes a culture of like continuous learning and improvement, right? Because it's like you see these people every day that you're working with, like you all are like part of this community, you're pouring into them and they're pouring their own knowledge into you. And like, at some point, right, you build like a strong community where everybody is there like for one common purpose, right? Which is because okay, we are users of this software and like we want it to be the best it can be. So reducing development costs and time to market. So
I have a question though. Can you hear me?
okay, yeah, I can hear you.
Like, I mentioned that designers can contribute to open source. Like,
Yeah,
serious, like how can designers contribute to open source? Like, is it like through the
that
GitHub? I know one way that devs can contribute or developers contribute is through the GitHub, but what about designers? Like, how can they contribute to open source?
okay. So that is like in the next slide, and I'm actually going to get to that. How like different people
Okay,
aside
okay, okay.
developers can contribute to open source. So reducing
All right.
development costs
Okay.
and time to market. So like I mentioned before, since open source projects are built like based on community, you have like tons of people around the world contributing to this project, and it takes lesser time and costs to ship new features, or resolve issues or anything than it would if it was just people working for the organization working for it. So you have like faster development, reduced costs, since everybody. It's a case of all hands on deck, and like everybody's contributing one thing or the other, enhancing software security and reliability. So I think this was what I mentioned earlier. So there's this idea that, especially like for us here, there's this idea that like if you make your code public, someone is going to steal it, or someone can find vulnerabilities and all of that. So it's in this case, right? It works both ways, because when you put up your code base to the public, when you open your code base to the public, right? If there are any vulnerabilities, right, someone can spot it easily and put it out. Especially like in Web2 projects now, you see a lot of projects have bug bounties. If you find the bug, you get to fill a form stating how to reproduce the bug, and they reward you for it and all of that. So this way now, since the code base is public, right, there are like lots of eyes on it. Also on the copying part, right, because the code base is public, right, if you decide, okay, you just want to use this someone's code or an organization's code without, let's say, putting credits or anything for it, it's easy to spot things like that, because as you're seeing the code, that's how like everyone is seeing the code. So even if you decide, okay, I don't want to fork this project, I just want to copy it and use it as if it's my own, it's very, very easy to spot that as well. So on security and reliability, right, your code is safe, it's secure. As much as there are people looking to find vulnerabilities within it, there are also people looking to resolve all of those issues your code has. Then on promoting inclusivity and diverse participation in tech, because open source software is free to use, right, it reduces the barrier to entry for participating in tech. Basically, anybody with a laptop and access to internet, right, can participate. You see top organizations that their code is open source, like I mentioned before, Bitcoin, Ethereum. You see someone from here who doesn't even have like any affiliation with these organizations can contribute to their code, right? In open source, right? People from like underrepresented groups in tech, like us Nigerians, can gain experience, and build your portfolios by contributing to top projects like this, right? Things like this, right, I will help to level the
Yeah.
playing field in tech space, because especially when you're just starting out, right? Hold on, give me a moment.
Okay. All right, but while we wait for her to come back, there's something you guys really need to know. I think recently, I think actually recently I made a post online about I won a bounty. The post was bounty to contribute to a project was like $250. Like the amazing thing here is the fact that she was the one that told me about the open source opportunity, and she actually won more than that. Just she won like $500. That's like minus the one she has been winning since. So, the point of the fact is just that I actually contributed to that project more of like just in the documentation aspect, but knowing a specific language which was Rust, and I used to contribute to that blockchain. So is that you guys still need to be active about everything I'm going to discuss right now, because it might actually be a life changing opportunity for you. So now that she's back, let's just are you ready to come back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. So
Uh,
as I was saying about
okay.
promoting inclusivity and diverse participation. So open source communities, because of like the low barrier to entry, they often attract contributors with like wide range of perspectives. For example, right, let's say how we are using like a certain software here, right, might not be the way someone, let's say in the US or in the UK, uses it, right? And when like there are more of us using softwares like that, they know like the kind of pain points we have here, right? How to upgrade their software, or what improvements to make for it to better serve us. And those can even be done like by the contributors from our own end that are using this software. So this diversity now like enables creativity and helps address the needs of like a broader user base for the software. And ultimately it helps like the community generally, like universally, to grow. So on to the next part, which is what kind of open source contributions you can make. So a common misconception again is that only developers contribute to open source, and that's because most times people think contributing to open source only covers like writing code or improving the code or looking for bugs within the code and all of that, right? So aside contributing code, which is adding new features, fixing bugs or whatever, right? There are also other ways you can contribute, right? Like documentation, which is actually like my favorite one. You can contribute guides, you can contribute you can help improve the documentation basically by, let's say if you're one of those people that are active in the community channels, right? Sometimes you might see, okay, there are often questions people are asking, how do I get to do this? And you find out that, okay, this is something that like the documentation does not cover and people do regularly. You can make a contribution, right, by addressing that, open an issue, and then find like what section in documentation to put your contribution. You can, like I said, you can help write guides, how best to use the documentation. um you can even, okay, translations is another point that we are going to cover. But yeah, you can help contribute to the documentation, which is actually an important part because it's the documentation that helps like how best to use the software or projects or whatever. So documentation needs to be regularly updated every time the software is upgraded. The documentation also needs to be updated. So it's a regular thing, right? It's something that uh, it's actually something that's a bit overlooked because most times when you go to a project profile on GitHub, right, you find out that like it's the place with the source code that has the most activity. You see maybe other small tools and the documentation, they have like very little activity, right? So actually if you're looking for like where to make a first contribution and you're skeptical about contributing code, right, the documentation is a very good place to start. It will help you learn more about the project and like help you get ready for that code contribution. Then testing and bug reporting. So again, if you're also skeptical about contributing code, right, you can help test out the software. Contributing by testing helps the developers identify issues that they might have overlooked, especially like when they make a new update, right? Something might have been broken somewhere. So by testing out the software, right, you ensure that the thing works smoothly. So you can test out the software by, let's say, writing tests in code and checking if, okay, it's in passed the test and it's working as it's supposed to be. Or you can just use the software as you would normally, right? And look out for unexpected behavior. Then note down the unexpected behavior, right? And create a bug report. In most Web3 projects, right, there's usually like a place for reporting uh, bugs, right? Especially DeFi projects. DeFi projects always have like active bug bounties, so you can look at that, right? That's another way to contribute to open source. Then translations, like I mentioned, right? Open source software are community driven, so there's always a language barrier, right? Most times, most of all this software are in English, and they have users that are non-native English speakers. So you can help by translating the software to other language. Let's say buttons or things written on things written in the UI that are in English, right? You can help like create translation for that in other languages. You can also help translate the documentation. If you go to Ethereum's documentation, Ethereum has been translated to like a whole lot of language, right? And most of basically all of that, right, was done by contributors. So that is another way to contribute that is not code. You can help translate the software, its documentation, its resources, guides, articles written about it to other language. Then for design, so if you go through most documentation, you see illustrations. You see, if you go to their websites, you see promotional materials for their brands. You see design assets and all of that. A lot of that was done by contributors. Sometimes, especially like when they introduce new assets, right? If you go to if you go to the code base, you can see like issues on for converting those new assets into formats that developers can easily integrate, things like SVG and all of that, right? All of these are done by what are they calling it? All of these are done by designers. The illustrations, flowcharts, things that documentation, right? That help bring the documentation to life, help make it less boring, more understandable. All of that are done by designers. There are also like design projects that, although this one is quite specific to each project, right? But you can just check out the project's repository on GitHub, right? In the issues tab, you can filter and check for design. There are almost always design issues to be solved there. Any questions on the design before we move further? Because I think that's what most people are interested in here.
Okay, if you have any questions on design aspect, you can just ask now. Or I don't think they have any questions though. If they have any questions, I can always get your attention and ask you.
All right. So benefits of contributing to open source. Why should you contribute to open source? As much as I've been talking about helping improve the software and make it better. Like, yeah, that is to your advantage too, because if it's a software that you use, right, you're contributing somehow directly to yourself. But like, what does contributing to open source do for you personally? First of all, for those of us contributing code, you get regular coding practices. So most times now, right, it's not every time someone is working on a side project, although like it's advisable to do that so that like you don't forget stuff and like you're always improving yourself. But it's not always every time you have like an idea for a new side project, right? And it's also not advisable to stay in like a position where you're doing where you're building projects on the same skill level and you don't advance yourself. So by contributing to open source, right, you have like regular coding practices, and you know that like your code is used by people every day. Like your code has like greater purpose. So it's not you can actually see the improvements you're making. Okay, I'll address the documentation parts like at the end. Let me finish this section. You also learn version control because most open source software are on GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. I mean, Bitbucket's one of them, right? So you improve your Git and GitHub skills. Documentation, for those of us writing stuff, right? You learn how to write documentation, which is something that you find that like a lot of people don't know how to do because the documentation is usually again seen as an afterthought. Meanwhile, like it's a very crucial part of it's almost as important as the code because if you don't tell people how to use your software, right, there's no way they are going to know how to do that, and that is what documentation does. Collaboration tools, you learn how to use different tools for collaboration, especially those interested in like product design and all of that, right? Most of the time, most of the times, right, you by making contributions regularly, right, you get to interact with people different. You get to interact like with people on different time zones and all of that, and there are probably specific tools each organization uses. So contributing regularly, right, will help improve your familiarity with tools like that. Then soft skills, in this process, right, you're going to be networking because you're going to be talking with a lot of people, both community members, people working with the organization, right? So you actually build your network and learn how to network with people. So building a public track record of your work. So again, right, by contributing to open source, everything you're contributing is online. So it's kind of easy to put your portfolio together because you know that everything you're doing, right, it's not that you built a project and you did not deploy it and the project is only existing on your machine, right? Everything you're doing is out there for everybody to see. Gain You also gain a real world project experience because, like I said, these softwares you're contributing to are being used by people every day. So you can even write that, especially like when you make like a big contribution, those ones that like maybe span over like weeks or possibly months, right? You can actually like put that on your CV that, oh, you contributed to this project and this is what you did, and like this is the impact your contribution had. Learning from code reviews and feedback by industry experts. So this part is actually important because most times when you go online, especially on Twitter, you see popular people in the tech space that we know, okay, these people have are advanced in their tech career and they have like a lot of experience. You see a lot of people meeting them for mentorship, like people that like don't even know these people, but you know, okay, they are good in their field and you want them to mentor you. A very easy way to get that right is by contributing to open source, because these people now have organizations they are working for. Some of them are the maintainers of their code base or are community members there. By contributing to open source, right, you have like top people in the industry reviewing your code, reviewing your contributions, reviewing your designs and all of that, right? That feedback that you're looking to get from these industry experts, like you get it directly and for free by contributing to open source. Like by the time you start doing this consistently, believe me, you'll see the improvements you've made from where you started to like where you are. Because for me now, right, I actually started making open source contributions early, like few months into my career, right? I started making open source contributions early, and I know that like that is something that's played like a huge role in my advancement, because it's not just me seeing, okay, this code works, right? And this is okay, it's not just me saying, okay, this code works, right, and it looks fine, right? I'm actually getting reviews from people that have been here for years, people that have experience, like way more experience than I do. They're actually like, okay, telling you, okay, this is how you improve on it, this is it's not enough for like the code to work, this is how you make it more efficient, this is why this thing works like this, right? So it's easy for you to get reviews and even build a relationship with all of these people. So connect with global developers and potential employers. Like I said just now, right? You get to build relationship and network with like top tier developers around the world. Access to exclusive opportunities within the community. So sometimes they are like Coxie mentioned before, right? The contribution to Stellar, while that bounty was open generally, right, there are sometimes that like some of these bounty are only open to contributors, to like existing contributors of the project. For those of us that are technical writers, there's this there's a popular resource for where to find technical writing gig. I don't really remember the name right now, and I don't even remember if it's who pays technical writers. So if you go to that resource, you'll find out that like a lot of the opportunities there currently are only for community members. So by joining an open source community, right, you have access to opportunities like this anytime they are available, and they're available regularly. Then potential for job offers and freelance opportunities. So most times people talk about how you can use open source to land a job. So by contributing to the code alone, right, is not going to get you hired, because of course they already have like people they've employed for stuff like that, and you're not contributing because you're looking for a job. But most times, right, like I said, when you network with members of this community, they always have like they always have like opportunities right, that they can refer you for. Like me now, most times, right, most of the gigs I've gotten in this space, right, we are based on referrals, and most of these referrals, right, we are people I've worked with in one open source community or in one project or another, and that's because like they can actually vouch for your skills, right? They've seen your work, they know what you can do, so they actually have like that confidence to refer you for opportunities. And most of these opportunities I'm talking about, right, are foreign gigs, because when, let's say, you've been a part of like a community for long, you've, what are they calling it, you've been contributing, they've seen, okay, your skill level, they've seen what you can do and all of that. Even if, let's say, a job opportunity opens up that within that organization, you have like, okay, okay, I'll answer that in a minute. You have like a higher chance to get that job because these are people that you've already worked with, and like you've already worked with, you've networked with. All of the uh, all of the responsibilities in the job description, if you match them right, they can actually say, okay, this person can do this, rather than like speculate and all of that, as if like they would if you were do this thing applying out of the blue. So if you're not a product designer or developer, is there any other niche to contribute? Okay, I don't know if you were here when I talked about that, but you can contribute as a technical writer, you can contribute to documentation, you can contribute as a designer by providing like illustrations, um, promotional material, brand assets, design assets for the software that developers can easily integrate. You can also even contribute if you're one of all those people that creates like tutorial videos, right? You can even contribute that to like the what are they calling, the projects,
Video content.
social media channels, YouTube and all of that, right? Those stuff like that to also count as contributions. Okay. The documentation, please. How do we go? Okay. So you can easily find any project. Basically, any existing project has a documentation. So all you have to do is go to the project's repository, the project's GitHub profile. Then among its repositories, you can check for the documentation repository. When you go there, right, you can browse among the issues, maybe filter for good first issues to find like beginner friendly issues that you can contribute. I hope that answers your question.
If you have any
Okay.
question, just drop the questions. We'll
On
continue.
finding the right projects to contribute. So first of all, the easiest kind of projects to contribute to is one that you've used, because I think in using projects every day, right, we identify issues with them. Most times it's just okay, you're probably not in the space to resolve that issue right now, or you just don't want to, or you don't think you can, because you could be using a software, right, and something can go wrong, right? That's an issue. You can actually just, if it's an open source software, you can actually just go to their repository, create an issue. If it gets like approved and assigned to you, you can make a pull request and resolve that issue. It actually is that easy. But if you're just looking for like a project to contribute to like kickstart your open source journey, first of all, right, you need to like know the skills you have. If it's design, if it's code is even based on the language, right? uh, if it's technical writing, all of that. Then identify your interest, because the the best way to use this to advance your career is by being a consistent contributor. So if you contribute to a project you don't have interest in, chances are maybe a month or two, you might just give up and decide, okay, I'm not interested in this anymore, all right? And then go to look for another one that you're interested in. Then goals, like I said, right?
Oh,
You using this,
I have a question.
yep, okay.
Okay, as situation whereby people just randomly contribute to random projects, like different projects, contribute to one today, to get married, contribute to the next one, and so on. They don't have like a specific project, they just like different projects. Okay, in that kind of situation, what do you think? Do you think it's something that is nice, or it's, I don't know? What do you think?
It's not advisable because as a contributor, right, you're part of this community. Like, you're not just supposed, you can do that, right, but you're not just supposed to be contributing without, I was getting to that point, right, having a goal in mind. Most times it can be because you just want to help improve this project, you like the project, right? But also, you might also have a goal. Maybe you have this skill you want to improve, and you see that, let's say, the project uses a programming language that you want to get better in, and all of that. So when you start doing all of this stuff, this project hopping, right? The You end up not advancing the way like you would have if you had just stayed consistent in one or two. It's
Okay,
like you spend, let's say, a week or two learning the basics of this project, right? You now spend a month contributing, and then you're not interested again. And then you move on to another project and you spend again a week or two learning about the project, right? You're not making progress, right? You're just, basically on the same level as it would be than it would be if like you had consistent contribution and basically consistent contribution in one or two projects.
that's true though.
All right. Okay.
Someone is
How do
asking
we
how do
find?
you find project to contribute. I think that's what.
Okay. So I think that's even the next point. So you can go to GitHub Explore. There's an Explore tab on GitHub. I don't know. A lot of people don't know that GitHub has a homepage and a page where you can check out projects, but it does. There's an Explore tab. I think. Please, did you share the slides for them? Cox, did you share the
No,
slides for
I
them?
didn't, but I can if you want me to.
Okay. Okay. So this is
No,
linked
should I
here
share
actually.
it right now?
Yeah, these three texts are linked. So you can go to GitHub Explore and find projects to contribute to. I think you can also filter it based on the type of projects you're looking for. You can also search out good first issues in GitHub topics. Good first issues are basically beginner friendly issues. Most of them are like most of them in terms of code, it might be stuff you might not even need to write up to 10 lines of code for. They are basically just issues to help you get over making your first contribution so that like you can get more comfortable contributing more intermediate stuff. Then Learn Web3 has a tab for open source projects in Web3 that have available issues for people to contribute to. There are a lot of
Yeah.
Web3 projects there. There's Ethereum, there's I think there's Filecoin there, there's Arif, there's Celestia. Basically, any projects, a lot of projects that they've integrated that has available issues that people can work on. You just see it pops up there and it's refreshed every time there's a new issue to contribute to. So that's another way you can easily find projects to contribute to. And also, like I said, right, if there's a tool you use regularly, right, you can check out if it's open source. If it's open source, you can check out their issues tab, see what they need help with, join their community channels and all of that. That's for me, right? That's the best way to start contributing to open source because this is a tool right? You already know about this tool. You most likely know how to use it. So navigating it right would not be as difficult as it would be if you are starting from scratch. If you are like learning about a new tool or software from scratch. Then when you find a project you want to contribute to, the first thing you want to check is its activity because it might not have a maintainer or it might not have an active maintainer. And if it doesn't, there's a high chance your pull request could stay there for months. It will not get merged. I actually have one like that currently, right? I have a pull request I made sometime in April or May that hasn't gotten merged till now and hasn't even gotten reviewed or anything. So you need to check like the project activities, check the last time like a pull request was merged, check that activity if there's anybody there to actually review your contribution. Then check out the community, join their community channels. Is the community active? Is the software or project built in a way that
Network is bad. Can you guys? I don't know. My network is bad. I don't know. Can anybody hear me?
my, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was my network.
Oh, okay. I was talking about like ensuring the documentation has a clear guide for contributions so that you don't start figuring out how to do that because each project contribution guide is different from others. They might have, steps on how to make your contributions that you need to follow, or a style guide or whatever that you need to follow. So it's always best to check project documentation, read contribution guide, and readme before deciding that you want to contribute to a project. Then joining an open source community. So why should you join a community, an open source community? So the community is basically where everyone using the software, everyone contributing to the software is where they are. So one of the best reasons you should join, right, is that's where you will start to build your network from, and that's where you also see people with more experience to learn from and to guide you in making your own contributions. You also get to find people that you can collaborate on projects with. It might not even be like a project relating to the software, right? You could just actually meet people that you can collaborate on other projects there with, build your professional network, gain mentorship opportunities, like I mentioned, right? Rather than pitching yourself or randomly DMing people you consider experts to ask like if they'll mentor you, right? You could easily start contributing to a project they work with or their own personal project that's open source, right? That's, to me, that's the best way to actually show your skills and actually show that okay, this is something you're interested in, this is something you're willing to put in effort and work for. Then finding the right community. So, like I mentioned previously, right, it should be a project that aligns with your interests and skills. It's very important that this is a project you're interested in. Otherwise, honestly, you'll give up at some point, and that point might not even be very far from where you started. It's very important that like it's a project you're interested in, which is why I said it's advisable to use like a tool to start. Sorry, to join like an open source community for like a tool or software or let's say blockchain that you're aligned with, right? Then consider the project size and activity level. I think we've gone over all of these in the previous slides. But yeah, activity level is important again, otherwise your pull request might just be there pending until further notice or anytime someone decides to check. Evaluate community culture and inclusivity. Then look for projects with clear contribution guidelines. Like I said, always nice to check the README and contribution guide when you discover a new project you want to contribute to. Then tips for effective participation within the community. Observe community etiquette. Most times, especially Discord, when you want to join, in the first page, there's always like rules and regulations and all of that. So it's always best to observe that. Otherwise, you get kicked out of the community. Read documentation and contribution guides. Start with beginner-friendly issues. So it's always best, even if you feel okay, you have like advanced skills and knowledge and all of that, right? Like I said, right, each software, each tool and all of that, right, have the way they do their own things. So it's best you start with something that is very clear and you're sure, okay, there's no way you could have misunderstood this, or there's no way you can get this wrong, right? I even, like, most times I suggest like starting with stuff like, let's say, broken links, small guides, restructuring stuff, basically stuff that is very, very clear and straightforward and direct, right? It's always easy. It's always best to start with stuff like that. Then don't be afraid to ask questions. This is actually like an important part because it's something that stifles most people's growth in the open source space, because there's that fear that, okay, everybody's seeing your code, everybody's going to see what you wrote, your design, and they're probably going to be judging you. And if you fail here, you're failing publicly. But honestly, right, nobody's really looking at all of that. Truly, nobody's looking at all of that, right? The way you're there to make your own contribution and all of that, right? That's how everybody is there to do theirs. And I feel like if the reason you don't have like whatever knowledge that makes you that whatever knowledge that is preventing you from doing what you want to do, that you don't want to ask about, right, is because you don't know yet. So, and to know, right, you would actually need to ask. You Okay, most times when you get to the point where you need to ask questions because you've done your own research and you could not find it, right? So that is actually why you should ask, right? Because another person's perspective, right, might be better than yours, or the person has probably encountered that stuff before and they know how they resolved it, right? So rather than waste time trying to solve the thing by yourself, this is not saying you should not try to solve it by yourself, right? But at some point, right, rather than waste like even more time trying to solve it by yourself, it's always best to ask questions. That's what the community channel is for. You can even ask like if you can even ask like on the GitHub, wherever the issue you're solving is, right? And people will be there to help you. Most open source communities are like very, very nice and friendly. A lot of them actually are very nice and friendly, right? And whatever questions you have to ask, right, nobody is going to tell you, oh, this your question is somehow I'm not going to answer it, right? They're going to provide an answer, or at least a resource that will help you figure out your answer. So attend community events and participate in discussions. This is also another way to make yourself stand out in the community, right? Because especially if it's a what are they calling it? If it's an active community that has like tons of contributors, right? You would need to stand out. The thing I mentioned about at some point, right, you start to get referrals for freelance jobs and all of that, right? That only happens if like they've noticed you. So you would need to get noticed and like be known for something. Okay, we always see this person in our documentation repository. This person always contributes docs. They'll be able to handle this. We see this person in like so tool. This is what this person does, right? So um I can refer this person for this gig because I know, okay, I've seen that, okay, they can actually do this, and like I'm confident they can handle what I'm referring them for. So an easy way to get maintainers and organization members to notice you is by attending community events and participating in discussions on the channel. So help other contributors and take on more complex tasks over time. So while starting with beginner friendly issues, right, don't just stay there because, oh, these are easy to solve, right? Let me continue solving them. After all, like, it counts as contribution, right? You feel like you're making a lot of contributions, meanwhile you're just doing like the same level of things over and over again, which is what I even talked about like earlier. When you're working on your own projects, right, you find out that like a while has passed, right, and like you're still in the same level, you've not advanced. So with time, right, you can ask to get assigned on like more complex issues. Most times, right, it doesn't even have to be something that you figured out how to do right away. It might just be, okay, I've come across this thing, I have an idea on how to get started, right? Maybe do the part you can, ask questions, figure out how to do the rest, right? This is it's actually a good opportunity to learn and improve your coding skills. Then you should also be open to helping other contributors, because the way you're asking people questions and they're answering your questions, right? That's how, like, when you get past, let's say, certain levels and you see people struggling with stuff that you've done before, you know how to do, right? You should also reach out to help them, because again, like, it's an open source community. Whatever progress it's the software it's based on makes, right, is done as a community effort. It's done because, like, everybody is helping each other. So I guess this is where this part stops for now. So I'll take any questions. Okay, there's how do we write documentation, good documentations as newbies? Any tools? Okay, so first off, I'm not sure what kind of tools you're asking, but if you're asking like for two, okay, if you're asking for tools to help you with your writing, you can try Grammarly. Grammarly is actually very, very helpful, like in writing stuff. It's not advisable to use AI. Do not use AI, because, like, again, this is documentation for the code. So it's actually very important that, like, whatever you're writing that the thing does or the thing is supposed to do is in fact like what it does. So most times, if when you're writing documentation, you should have tested out the thing you're writing on, because documentation is not based off speculation. It's based off, oh, if you do X, Y is supposed to happen, right? Like, you cannot just make assumptions in it. So the only tool I can actually suggest to help, and that's like with your grammar and like writing, is Grammarly. You also need to learn Markdown or uh, whatever language they are writing their documentation in. It's usually Markdown, and then learn about documentation managers. Uh, hope that answers your question. And what if no one is answering in particular and everyone is just all about asking their own questions? Is it okay to text the admin or some, or you think will have an idea privately? Yes, it is. If you can text them, although on Discord now, I think because of like bots and spamming and a lot of scam accounts, a lot of people have their DMs closed and all of that. But yes, it's always okay to ask the admin or someone you think will have an idea privately. But that's also what I mentioned earlier here about evaluating the project you want to contribute to. Evaluate the activity, the community, see if the community is active before you start contributing, so you don't run into something like this. Any other questions?
So have you seen the other? Okay, yeah, I think I've answered that one already. Okay. So I think this is the opportunity you all have to ask any question you want to ask. So because this is the first section of the workshop, and the next session is going to come up next month. So that is a whole lot of time. So if you have any question to ask, just type the question now and answer
Oh, I should
anything
also
at all.
ask, um, if you're looking to learn how to write good documentation, you can also take a course. If that's what you're asking. I didn't think about course at first because I was thinking about like tools to help you write, but you can take like a course on writing documentation. I think there's one about there's technical writing mentor, something like that on Twitter. I think that's a very good one right now. They cover API documentations,
Okay,
other types of technical writing.
that would be nice. So we have just 6 minutes more before we end the session. Uh, I think we have touched every area that we plan to touch for the session, and the next section, part 2, is coming up next month, which is same topic though, but part 2. And we're just going to talk about like a comprehensive guide to use GitHub for open source contribution, including making pull requests and engaging with the community. and also talk about like so we have a hands-on session where you make your first contribution to an open source project with guidance from an experienced mentor which we already have here. So next one is going to be really technical, not with that technical, but kind of a bit technical, like not like today. Today is just more of like an introduction to open source, and so that everybody here can know the importance of it, and also the opportunity that's attached to it. Actually, I'm very grateful to her for opening my eyes for it though. Because one thing about me, I love money. So when I made the first money for me, I was like, okay, yeah, there's opportunity here. I really have to focus it. So that's the reason why I'm here, and I really want everybody to see. Someone asking about what course? Say technical mentor. What do you say? I don't
Hold
know.
on. I'm not
Technical
sure of the name. Something about technical writing mentor. Yeah, on Twitter.
okay, now technical
Let me
writing
check.
mentor. Okay, what about that? So if you guys are a bit late, like we just had we just sent technical writing. So we had our currently skill up training that is ongoing, and like, I think it's kicked out next week or next 2 weeks. One of the course there is technical writing. So like probably next time we can take that course. Someone said that for lecture. Now I understand why I couldn't proceed with Atrishi. Oh, like she's actually one.
Oh,
I'm sure you are. Can you just give them a little bit of introduction about the Atrishi part? Like, I know you contributed
okay.
to Atrishi.
Okay, so for outreach, I actually contributed to a technical writing project. It was with common workflow language to improve their user guide. So
Okay.
then most of the issues. Okay, actually, right. When I first that was actually my first experience with technical writing in an open source environment. So I didn't actually know much about technical writing then, and the project was like one I didn't know much about because like it had like a lot of science stuff in it. So the thing, like I mentioned, right, with technical writing is that with writing documentation is that you actually have to test the stuff and like ensure that okay, this is what it does,
Okay.
and then you document it, or this is what it looks like, then document it. It's not like, let's say if you're writing an article, or let's say you are just writing about something that you can make speculations and all of that, right? So for documentation, right, it's more about using the software and then documenting the software based on the results you got. Then for outreachy, well, I can't really say because the contribution stage for outreachy is actually is it's tough to an extent. And to me,
Yeah,
actually, the
very tough.
contribution stage is even more tough than the internship itself because you're competing against like a lot of people, and so at some point you probably start to doubt yourself because you're seeing other people's contributions and they look better than yours. So honestly, right, for me, right, it's just okay. If you feel you have the skills for a particular project, you just go there, do your thing, block out everybody's contribution so that you don't get this distracted, and then hope for the best. And also help self to be very very active in the community. I think that was one of the things that helped me, right, being active in the community while contributing, like helping other people with their contributions and all of that.
Okay. If it's one thing I've actually gained from this session is the fact that even though you really want to like contribute to a random project, you should also make sure that you go to the community and contribute. So and like be active there. Not just you going to the GitHub and looking for an issue and contributing, but just go to the community and just like engage and just make people know that okay, yeah, I'm some person doing this thing in this section. So just make yourself known, do a whole lot of things. Someone is saying here that unfortunately didn't get a me for skill up two. Okay, like I feel the reason why you didn't get a me for skill up two is because maybe you didn't perform one or two tasks. Because it's a free training and everybody's allowed to get in, but It's that you didn't follow Women Endeavor on Twitter or one of the social media pages, or maybe you're a guy. I don't know if you're a guy, sha, but maybe. So that's one of the reasons we didn't get accepted. Someone said, can one be a technical writer or write documentation without deep knowledge of programming language? Nice question. Is that possible?
It is. It is really because again, right? Um, okay, let me use myself as an example, right? When I started like contributing to documentation, right? The highest programming language I knew then was JavaScript, and it was beginner level JavaScript, right? Like I said, right, you always see issues like beginner friendly issues that you can start with. It's not all it's not all contributions that you would need to write code inside, right? Sometimes you might just, okay, let me use like a recent contribution that I submitted, right, on Celestia. So the contribution was on documenting the nodes data store, right? Basically, just to document the files and directories there to say, okay, this is what this directory does that. For a contribution like that, you don't need to know how to code. You just need to know exactly what the thing does, right? Which you can do by testing it or going to the folder and see, okay, this is what this thing stores. So you can actually start without deep knowledge of programming language. But at some point, right, when you start doing advanced contribution, you will need programming languages. You will need to know like whatever programming language that software that you're documenting is built on.
Wow, that's amazing. I've learned a lot from this session, and I'm pretty sure everybody here has learned so much. So and I'm guessing there's no question again, right? Because we have come to an end of this session. But this is your last chance to drop your last question. If you have, kindly drop it. If not, overall your piece. And maybe we're going to see next session next month, 8 p.m. again and all. So if you're active on mail, you will see that it just sent a feedback form to your mail. So kindly fill those forms so I can know how to make this monthly workshop way better. If you're first time joining, please give us some love on Twitter. Take a screenshot and post on Twitter. Tag Women Defy. Just give it a shout out. And also give a shout out to our speaker as well. She's amazing. She made that time to join here. Like I sent a message last week about this workshop, and she just said yes. It was so much. It was good, and I'm very happy about it. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you everybody for joining our speaker. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate this. And for our next section, we'll talk about how to contribute and make your first contribution. So bye guys. See you guys next month. One love.